So essentially, V2X provides situational awareness for the car. This is the DOT vision, the US DOT, and it's very similar to the European DOT equivalent vision as well. Essentially, you see that every car is connected to everything. Every car is connected to the infrastructure, to your traffic light, your parking lot, even to your light rail, your metro rail, anything that you are likely to be in the vicinity of on the road. So I'm not going to go too much into the technology itself, but this is kind of where we are in terms of last year's, at least, market share in the US. So what does Savari really do? I mean, if you look at an analogy, right, between a smartphone, I think this is all something that you're very familiar with. The first smartphone came in '94. The calendar app was the innovative app at that time. 2007 was the iPhone. 2008, the App Store. And that literally changed everything, right? So if you look at today, there are almost 3 million apps. So can you do something similar in the automotive industry? We believe we can, right? And we believe we are really centrally poised to do this because we access CAN data. We have the wireless communication piece, right? And there's a lot of other aspects that I'm not going to go into right now. But if you look at a very, very broad, high-level picture of the stack, there you go. I mean, you have hardware, you have a middleware, and you have all of our IP contained in the middleware, and you have your applications, right? So a sample of our applications, you saw the intersection collision, but this is just a sample. We have a lot more that we've developed. Your blind spot, your forward collision, electronic braking, there are tons. If you look at your vehicle to infrastructure side applications, the one before that I showed was just vehicle to vehicle. But if you look at vehicle to infrastructure, now you could have your pedestrian, your smartphone actually talking to your roadside units. You can have your onboard car units talking to your roadside units while they're talking to each other at the same time for safety reasons. And now your roadside infrastructure units can talk to tolling servers, authentication servers, mobility servers. I mean, literally, the sky's the limit. It's a question of imagination to come up with an app. Just a sample of what kind of messages can be delivered into the vehicle. And this is just, again, a sample. We've actually have applications where we stream the whole traffic light data into your car. And this has been shown for truck fleet, especially for trucks where fuel consumption is a major issue. You know, their fuel consumption goes down by 10%, which is huge for them. Some smart city intelligent transportation services, again, similar in terms of, this is actually taken from the New York DOT. This is a smart city pilot. They will be starting in 1 year's time. We hope to be right in the middle of it. This is going to be 1,000 roadside units in Manhattan and 10,000 cars. When I say cars, I mean buses, all vehicles, 10,000 vehicles. So their belief is if they can make a difference in mobility and safety in Manhattan, you could do this anywhere. And that would rapidly percolate pretty much to all major cities in the US. So the journey hasn't been easy, and I'm sure a lot of you people know, right? In the beginning, I mean, I would say almost 2009, we bootstrapped ourselves. But then we got into this whole technology called V2X. And we worked with an organization called CAMP. I don't know how many of you have heard of CAMP. How many of you actually are? Oh, a few of us, okay. So it stands for Crash Avoidance Metrics Program. And it is a consortium between the largest automotive OEMs in the world and US DOT. And there are similar consortiums in Europe as well. So the idea was to go through, you know, usually when you have a consortium studying a new technology, they look at feasibility, they look at, you know, does it make sense technologically, is it practical, is it field deployable, is it scalable, is it interoperable, right? And all of that took about 3 years. And then the outcome of that was the Ann Arbor safety pilot. Again, you might have seen press and so on about it. The Michigan safety pilot, it refers to the same thing. Essentially, 3,000 cars in Ann Arbor were wired with these equipment to test over a year, almost a year and a half, to actually look at end user feasibility. I mean, does it make sense for an end user? Will an end user actually, you know, adopt this? You know, what is the customer response like? And, you know, I'm happy to say that there was almost an 80% approval rate in terms of they want this technology if it's there today. They're happy to buy a car with this technology. And then NHTSA, which is the safety wing of US DOT, came up with an ANPRM, which stands for Advanced Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. Essentially, what they're saying is, we're going to make this a mandate. Here it comes. So once it's a mandate, all new cars, at least, must have it going into production. So what's ahead? is V2X only a sensor? Is it only a safety sensor? So it turns out it's not just a safety sensor. US DOT actually believes this is necessary for going into autonomous driving. And Arvind actually put it very well, and I've used his line here, right, to say that you look at Google and Uber and Alibaba, everybody who's investing in autonomous driving, autonomous cars, they're all looking at a node model. They're all looking at cars to make independent decisions. Well, I think some of that will still be there. But imagine trying to make an independent decision, going back to my example of all of you in the room are a car, try and get up and go to the door. It could be chaotic in certain situations. So you actually need a network in some situations to derive some kind of information, especially about your neighbors, about people who are in your vicinity, in terms of what they're doing, right? Not just for safety, but even for streamlining certain processes. So US DOT believes that V2X is necessary for autonomous driving in the future. It is not an option. So what else can the automotive OEMs, I mean, what can they do to leverage off of V2X? If you look at the mobile world, there's been disruption. We talked about the App Store. We talked about the amount of revenue. It's almost 20 billion, the last I've checked, in terms of numbers. So they have a captive audience here. You bought your car. It's with you. There's no other way to monetize it. Here's a great way. Have an app store. In some sense, they're already doing it. But the question is, do you have connectivity in every car? Not yet. But V2X kind of brings that. There is no choice, right? Once the mandate comes in, this is going to be part of the car. And there's going to be large amounts of data being generated. This is where IoT data analytics comes in. And this is humongous in terms of the actual data. The question is, how can all this be leveraged? So you look at data analytics. Well, there is local analytics. There's going to be the cloud-based analytics. And if you look at the amount of data that goes in, or rather that goes out of an autonomous car, it's expected to be 2 terabytes. There is just no way that you can actually upload everything and process everything in the cloud. So a lot of that has to be mined locally itself. I'm just going to quickly touch on tech companies and what they are doing in terms of how are they actually looking at this whole industry. So if you, sorry, let me start with the automotive OEMs, right? If you look at, they're actually looking at it as, okay, this will kind of evolve naturally over time. We've got to keep our existing systems, our existing supply chain in place, right? And kind of innovate slowly. We'll get there. The tech companies are actually looking at it completely the other way around. They're saying, we're just going to disrupt this whole thing, that it doesn't even matter. And they have a lot of advantages, right? I mean, they don't have the baggage of any old vested stake in this business. I mean, they don't have anything invested as such in this business in the past. So what's really going to happen? I think nobody knows, right? But it's something that's going to be interesting to watch. But you see, tech companies are trying to become automotive OEMs, and automotive OEMs are trying to become tech companies. So there is a convergence there. Just kind of, again, touch on the same thing. There is going to be profound disruption. The question is, of course, when, in what form it'll get there. But if you look at the overall automotive industry, the amount of revenues, the business that it touches, you're talking about 2 trillion. I mean, this is not small, right? In various sectors that kind of surround it. And one of the interesting things that are being talked about right now is mobility as a service. I mean, ride sharing, Uber is already doing that. But imagine having service level guarantees. Imagine you taking a cell phone plan. Similar to that, you are actually going to take a mobility service plan, right? Which says, it could say, I need a car, I need transportation, 10 minutes. I'm going to pay a higher premium for it. Or I'm going to need it in 1 hour. I could pay a lower premium for it. I get 60 rides a month, or I get 100 rides a month. The question is, do you even need to own a car anymore at some point? This is all out in the future, of course. So I think that's it. I mean, I'm almost out of time, but I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of Savari, kind of a very high level of what we do. And I'll kind of end with one of our videos from, you've already seen the intersection collision, but the last video, please, the third one. This is from one of our friends in the Bay Area who are using V2X.
Southbound trucker coming up on marker 77. You copy?
Copy, southbound truck. I got you in my mirrors.
Would you like to link up? Okay to link. We are linked. Four-wheeler cut us off. Are you okay back there? Yeah, it's all good back here.
It's a platooning app made possible by V2X. That's it. Thank you. Any questions? I think we have time only for one.
It's a pretty predictable question, I guess. How do you see something like this working in the Indian context as far as urban traffic is concerned? I mean, from a safety point of view, and is this something that can be switched on and switched off, as you ride in traffic?
So I think there is a minimum working guarantee that has to be there in terms of not allowing the user to switch on and switch off. The mandate is going to clear a lot of that but this is for the US context. What you're asking is really, how far away are we? I mean, that's really the question that you're asking.
Yeah, I mean, I'm imagining a scenario where, I'm driving through Bangalore and then I've got a tempo guy cutting me on the left, a bike cutting me on the right. Is my car going to go beep, 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 beep all the time? Or?
Not in the state that is in right now, I can tell you that. I mean, it's going to be very hard to make it work when you have 1 foot distance between the other car. I mean, there is, I was telling this to someone the other day that our chief scientist who works in algorithms, when he visited here, this was the same question put to him, and he said, if somebody's willing to die, there's really very little you can do. So that kind of sums it up, right? Thank you.
All this is so interesting. We're running late. I'd like to invite Charan of Logistimo. This is our last startup presentation of the day. We're going to rush him a little, so apologies, Charan, in advance. But come on here and talk about how supply chain is being reinvented by Logistimo. Please, thanks.
Can you hear me? Good evening, everyone. I'm Charan from Logistimo. I'm Charan from Logistimo. I'm head of engineering at Logistimo. It's fun to see and great to see that so many technologies, space to vehicles to all of these things. But what we are disrupting is we are on the other end of the world. We are in rural areas. We are in the emerging market sector, right? So the video that was last played where you saw a truck and the trucker was wearing Ray-Ban glasses. I'm thinking, when would it be in India? When would a trucker in India wear a Ray-Ban glass and go, right? So, I mean, that's the sector we are in. We are a social enterprise. A couple of years ago, when I was looking for an opportunity, I found out about Logistimo and the great things they were doing, right? It excited me. The social enterprise, they are trying to ensure the availability of essential goods in the last mile, right? That's where we began our journey, and we have made a significant progress. So what is Logistimo's platform, right? So we are open source software, hosted services for supply chain and logistics in rural and emerging markets. So what does that mean? What is supply chain? Supply chain is basically flow of materials, right from procuring raw materials to the time it goes to the factory and to the time you stock it in the retail store. So the whole thing is supply chain. So the rural population in the emerging world is about 68%. So this is about 70% of the market is still waiting to be disrupted. How do you supply to all these folks? I mean, if you talk to majority of the private folks, they won't go here because the cost of it is too high, right? I mean, the infrastructure is not good. The margins are low. Why would anyone do this? So where did we begin our journey? Healthcare is a perfect sector. because with the government's mandate, right, they have the need to reach everyone in this country, right, with vaccines or whatever it is. So what you are looking at is a picture of the stock at one of the primary healthcare centers in Karnataka. So they apparently stock different things, including your usual crocines, profins, and whatnot. The supply chain management in this context is about managing the right quantity, the right materials, at the right amounts, and managing them in the right conditions. You're looking at vaccines here, the TT dose and whatnot. These have to be managed between 2 to 8 degrees Celsius, otherwise they lose their potency. I mean, if you inject this to a child after they lose potency, it's almost like you inject water in them, right? It's not going to be useful. So it's important to track them at the right condition, and it has to be there at the right time. So you're seeing at the PHC, again, these are mostly rural folks who are on daily wages, right? So if they're coming here for a vaccination, it usually means a lot to them. They lose their daily salary, and the hospitals are usually few villages apart. They have to spend almost an entire day to come here, only to find out that the vaccine is out of stock. Imagine they lose the trust in the system, right? That's how difficult it is. That's why it is very important to ensure the stock is available, the vaccines are there at the right time, they're all kept in the perfect condition. So in the end, the overarching goal is about ensuring every child in this country or in the entire world gets vaccinated. So what are the challenges in getting to the last mile? Obviously a ton, right? You can see I put an entire cloud of things there. But the way we look at it is there are primarily 4 buckets: structural, and the second one is technical challenges. Third is business challenges. Fourth is human challenges. Structural, what I mean by structural is the infrastructure challenges, where you don't have good road connectivity, you don't have electricity all the time. And technical challenges include you don't have internet connectivity, and the talent scarcity is there. And business is usually the fragmented supply chains, right? Especially in the government sector, the kind of processes used at different echelons of the supply chain is usually different. Somebody uses Tally, somebody uses own open source developed software, somebody has a paper-based register. So how are you going to reduce this information and asymmetry, and how are they going to decide what is the right amount of stock should be there in a village in Karnataka, right? Who is going to decide that? And again, they do a lot of eyeballing again, which is basically saying the last mile pharmacist or nurse, whoever is managing. They say, okay, next week I'm going to district anyways. I'm going to pick up, 10 BCG doses this time. I mean, there's no math behind it. They're not supply chain guys. They have no idea. They're pharmacists, right? So these are all the challenges. Our solution is basically to digitalize this whole thing, right? So bring symmetry across. Everybody at higher echelon can see exactly what is going on, who is stocked out where right now, right? Who is entering data into the system, who is not entering data into the system. Obviously, a cloud-based solution. This works on multiple mobile applications. We pioneered this in Karnataka. I mean, at that time, J2ME was a big thing, the Java featured phones, right? It has to work on it. Android is only creeping in now into the rural areas. So, of course, it works on Android, and there's web dashboards and whatnot. See, the application for the last mile folks is pretty simple. You just enter your issues. You just tell us what is your stock, right? If you ask them anything more than that, they're not going to give you the data. They don't trust you. So what we provide is supply chain toolbox for the digital age, right? With all this bells and whistles, inventory management, order management. If you have any questions about this, you can talk to me outside of this. There's a little time. So I mean, being an engineer, I just would love to talk about the technology challenges, especially, apart from all the business stuff. So this is the first one. You build a beautiful cloud solution. You give it to the last mile guy. This is what he says. Just the loading icon. I mean, this is not a myth. This is true. The second is this. Large part of it does not even have internet. So where do you put your cloud servers? On your head? This is a log entry from our server. Someone from Rajasthan, I think, was doing a transaction. You're seeing two numbers, the response time as seen by him versus the response time given by the server. You build a beautiful application, 41 milliseconds to do a transaction update. He sees it only after 12 seconds. Fun, right? So the way we work around all of these problems is we have this multi-channel transposition concept. Obviously, there is intermittent here and there. There's no intermittent in some places. We leverage the data redundancy across many platforms, right? Using SMS as a channel, If there is internet, we try to sync it. If it does not sync, you use offline sync at a later point of time. If that is not even there, you use SMS, a patent file, it's still pending. I mean, specifically around logistics supply chain. This is good. And the other bigger problem is the workforce monitoring, right? So what is the incentive for these last mile folks to do anything? Why do they even enter data? In one of the studies done by WHO, it was the ANMs, the auxiliary nurse midwives, who are supposed to carry these polio vaccines, go cover a large geography area and ensure that campaigns are done properly. But they found out that a lot of them were just dumping the vaccine somewhere and coming back a week later and collecting their paychecks, right? I mean, you spend all this money to invest, and somebody at the higher level has decided that this has to go. But if the last mile folk is not working, then this whole system is waste. I think somebody working in Aadhaar or anyone should know better than this, better than me, I suppose, right? So the last mile problems kind of overshadows everything that you thought about at the high level. So the way we tackle that is using GPS and the same problems in the transportation, private distributors, multiple issues. And the cold chain monitoring, again, you have to maintain the fridges at the right temperatures, right? Sensor devices are not something new. I think I've seen a ton of devices outside this floor. And the way we do it is we try to integrate that data into the inventory management system, right? So if somebody somewhere is not maintaining his fridge, the power is low, obviously there's 4 hours of power, it has to sustain 24 hours of no power time in the range of 2 to 8 degrees. That's somebody's problem to invent better fridges. But what we do is we alert them. Whenever something goes out of range, we alert them. And somebody, what would be priceless is if somebody can, I mean, someday we'll be able to tell, basing on how the fridge was maintained versus how the, infant mortality rate reduced. Infant mortality rate is number of kids. Time out? Sure. Last one is power management. Support maintenance is important. And this is the talent we have. These are the guys who are using the app. I mean, most of them are 8th class passed or whatnot. This is the application, bulletin board, our application showcasing. We started at somewhere around 40% availability. We ended up at 99% availability of vaccines in Karnataka, in partnership with Corona Trust. We're scaling up to 3 states in our country, the 3 most populous states. This is where we are. Pretty soon we'll be scaling up to the 11 more states. Hopefully, this is in partnership with the Ministry of Health. That's all.
Charan, I'm sorry we rushed you. I must tell you that Logistimo presented we did a learning session for Bill Gates on Sunday, 3 hours. One of the companies that presented Logistimo, it completely blew him away. And the reason is because of the last slide that you saw. They're able to successfully and repeatably bring down improve the availability of vaccines in their pull-based kind of supply chain model. They've managed to do that in Sudan, they've done that in Burma, they've done that on Myanmar, they've done that in UP, and several parts of India. So they are able to make this model in low context environments work. So much so that there was a joke at one time that perhaps GE needs to use them in Bangladesh because that's the only way to keep their aircraft engines flying, because they have about 200 aircraft engines in Bangladesh, and no traditional supply chain solution ensures that they're always flying. And so maybe this is something that GE needs there. And this is not a statement from my side, it's actually from a very senior GE leader. So this is a breakthrough kind of a model. We rushed them a little, and apologies for that, Charan. So with that,